Hello, and welcome to another episode of shOPs Talk. I guess the inaugural 2021 shOPs Talk. Welcome, everyone. Looks like we're getting a bunch of folks in right now, so we'll let everybody get in, get settled. For everybody that's still working from home, there's a theme here. If you need to go grab your Hawaiian shirt, go grab it. We're celebrating warmer ideas right now. I know it's January and cold for a lot of folks, but yeah, if you want to go grab your Hawaiian shirt, let us know that you grabbed it. We'll even promote you and you can show it off. So yeah, we'll give everybody another 30 or so seconds to jump in, get settled. We'll get everything kicked off. But man, excited to have you guys here. Sorry, Jackie. I know it's still a little cold where you are, but we're trying to bring warm vibes. All right, that's the most we can do in this cold January right now. So.
We tried. We still have our overwear on as well.
I missed the vest memo, but I at least have a jacket. And if Keith joins, I'll give him a shout out, but he's not here yet.
I was about to say, I know Keith will be jumping on. He'll be happy that you're wearing the Ride and Raise stuff. So, and then Nick's on. He's still warm out in California, so he's obviously South Bay area. Alex, he's not where you are in the San Francisco area. Cool. Man, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. I know we got a packed day of fun things to talk about. So again, thank you everybody for joining this episode of shOPs Talk. For those that this might be the first episode, this is our partnership with Salesforce on really helping elevate our community, the Wizard of Ops community, and operations professionals, exactly like Alex and Jonathan. So excited to continue that partnership. Obviously, we have a big year of 2021 with additional episodes coming up. So, of course, you'll get notified via Slack and email about some of our next episodes. But, man, really excited for two reasons today. I've known Alex and Jonathan for a while. I've watched both of them grow in their RevOps career. But also, this topic is near and dear to all of us. And it very much goes with thanking Jonathan for kicking this topic off. He actually posted about this on LinkedIn, I guess a couple of months ago. It might have been back in December, about generalist versus specialist. So much to unpack there. Before we do it, we want to hear from you guys. I'm going to open up a poll. Please answer it. And it's very easy. We want to hear from you. Are you a generalist? Are you a specialist, or do you even know? So feel free to jump in there. We'll reference the poll as we go through the episode. But it's fun watching these as you get to launch them from a host perspective, because you get to see how the sort of tide shift. Like some are generalists, some are specialists, while people are voting. So please jump into the poll and let us know. But without further ado, like I said, we'll kick things off. So excited to have both y'all on here. Thank you again for taking the time out to talk shop with us. We do want to let y'all introduce yourself. So, Jonathan, I'll let you kick it off. Tell us a little about who you are, who you work for, obviously, and your role in the operations world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brad, for having Alex and I on. Certainly looking forward to the conversation, and have enjoyed all the conversation that's happened in WizOps, which I've been a member of, I guess, coming up on a year now. So it's been a blast. A little background on me. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia, currently serve as the Director of Sales and Marketing Operations at a company called Achieve It. So Achieve It is a B2B SaaS platform that our goal is to help organizations track, manage, and execute key plans and initiatives. So normally mid-market to enterprise type organizations. But my role and my career has been a little bit of everything from early stage consulting to sales to been through an acquisition, done some customer engagement and strategy consulting, to now RevOps. And another hat I wear is I'm also our head of marketing at Achieve It. So we'll get more into the topic of generalists, but that's a little bit of my background and why this topic is probably one that I'm more passionate about than many of the other ones.
I love it. Yeah, it's like you said, you kicked this whole topic off, and so we can't thank you enough for even giving us enough to talk about. And we'll be doing a disservice, because 30 minutes of conversation on generalists for specialists is nearly not enough. But that being said, Alex, again, excited to have you on. I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your wide world of operations.
Yeah, hey everyone, Alex Miller, Director of Operations from Sendoso. Super excited to be here today. I'd like to say I'm a longtime lurker, first-time caller. WizOps has been such an awesome community and resources to be a part of. I can't tell you how often enough I'm just in there almost every day, just trying to get some insight from the rest of the community. So super awesome. So for those of you guys who don't know Sendoso, we're a company that helps other companies engage, convert, and retain customers through strategic sending. So we dabble pretty heavily in things like personal gifts, swag, e-gifts, cameos, all that fun stuff. I've been at Sendoso now for about 18 months. We're based in San Francisco. I look over all of our sales development, account executive, account management, and customer success operations in the org. It's grown a lot over the last 18 months since I've been there. We're just north of 300 employees now. Probably mostly based here in San Francisco, but then also out in Phoenix, Arizona. So it was a fun job for the first couple months while I could get to go out to Arizona pretty frequently. A little bit a bit different sitting in my living room for the last year, but nonetheless, it's been a fun ride, and have seen not just the company, but kind of the operations function evolve a pretty decent amount over the last 18 or so months. So looking forward to chatting about that. And a long time back, like I started my career out in sales. My first job out of college was an SDR. Kind of had that funny, just like kind of got thrown into the deep end of the pool at an early stage startup, just saying, hey, go be the SDR and the support person and the account executive. And oh, by the way, go set up Salesforce, go set up Marketo, just make it happen. And have been working, had the fortune and opportunity to work with a couple of really cool startups ever since, kind of owning operations for scaling revenue teams. So yeah, super excited to jump into the conversation today. It's one that's super near and dear to my heart for sure.
I love it. It's so cool watching, and again, knowing both of y'all for as long as I've known y'all, and getting to have one-off conversations about so many different things. Obviously, Alex, watching you and your team grow over the last year has been just amazing. So we're excited to have both y'all on. Thank you again. And you mentioned the background side of it. We've had other Shops Talk episodes about what the background of operations looks like. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm not going to deviate too much, but we've talked about this. Going through those other roles of sales, going through SDR, AE, everything else brings such a level of empathy. And I know we'll kind of key in on that too, is the generalist versus specialist mentality. So, kind of looking over at our poll again. Thank you all for everybody jumping in. It looks like we had about 70% or so of folks actually respond. And spoiler alert, about 83% of the responses, generalist. I say spoiler alert because we're going to talk heavily about the difference between generalist and specialist, why there's pros and cons, why certain folks will start in one side, pendulum swing to the other, and then pendulum swing back. Very much part of what we'll be discussing. But even before we get there, we polled the audience. Obviously, we're going to poll our panelists. Alex, we'll start with you. How do you define yourself in your ops world? Are you a generalist or specialist?
Yeah, it's funny. If I were to Google myself, I would hope that the first search result comes up is the jack of all trades, master of none. I think that, I've definitely come from a generalist camp. I'd say that I've definitely had sometimes branching out where I've dabbled with being a subject matter expert, but for the most part, like true in generalist. And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon, to be honest with you.
I love it. Yeah, it's like I said, we'll get into the evolution of it, but yeah, it's funny. I love if I Google myself, this is how I hope I have my results. So, Jonathan, same question. Do you consider yourself specialist, generalist?
Yeah, honestly, I'm worried about what will pop up if I Google myself, so I'm not going to go into that camp there. Yeah, 100% in the generalist camp. I mean, I'd say from a work standpoint, every day is different. Wearing a different hat, that really leans itself towards a generalist. But I'd say my personal life is outside of work is the exact same. I think I confuse the hell out of Spotify each year when it tries to figure out my 2020 in review, because it's all different types of music. I have random hobbies that'll drop and just change just like that. So always changing, always trying to learn new things, try new things. And I think that has kind of helped, both personal life and my career development, trying all those new activities and really learning from it, using it to apply to different problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll agree with both of you. I'm very much in that generalist camp. Even prior to Sonar, putting my ops hat back on for spending so many years in it, I think we all realize, you by hook or crook, sometimes you're voluntold to now become a specialist in something that you didn't even sign up for. I remember one of my very first days a long time ago, the very first time I got given the quote admin keys to the castle for Salesforce. I didn't sign up for that, so I got to figure out how to be a specialist of it, even though I've got general knowledge of it. So yeah, it's funny how we all evolve in that. I see Jackie; she's I'm generally special, which I appreciate that as well. I can see that. When we think about building RevOps teams, this is something we've talked about often on this episode and so many of the different Slack channels that we have. This is unique, and we'll preface all this by saying, if you looked back in time, we fire up the DeLorean, we look at sales ops or RevOps. RevOps really wasn't even a title, probably call it 5 years ago. But even then, in the sales ops world, we had to all be generalists because we had to own so many different things. That is shifting now. We're seeing this evolution of RevOps teams in place now. Alex, I know that's a big part of your really curious if it's a specialist type role versus the generalist type role, and what exactly are you looking to hire for? Do you favor one or the other?
I lost you for a second there, Brad, but I think what you're asking is how have our team
Oh, no,
scaled from both
that.
a generalist and specialist perspective. So, I can think back, and Sendoso's come through a really interesting pathway as we've scaled out our RevOps team at Sendoso. It started with, I can't even say I was the first. Honestly, the first ops person, Sendoso, shout out to Sarah Kopis, was our head of marketing operations. And she was pretty much doing everything. It was like marketing ops. We were implementing Marketo. She owned Salesforce at the time. And what we've done since then is hired, I would say, smart generalists. And we operated for probably the last year or so in kind of what I'll call like a business partner generalist type support model, where we have kind of a different generalist that supports different functional units in the different parts of the company. So Sarah, I hopefully took a burden off her plate of like owning Salesforce and things like that. Let her continue to focus on what she does phenomenally, which is marketing operations. I kind of jumped in and helped own sales ops. So working with our new CRO at the time, like really building out the nuanced metrics and how do we look at the performance of our sales team, and of course all the tooling that comes along with it. As this team has continued to scale, we actually now have a dedicated person supporting our sales development operation. We have a fairly large SDR team out in Phoenix. I like to think of it as our secret weapon for how we go to market. So we actually have a dedicated ops person supporting that. And then we also have someone on our post-sale side supporting customer success, supporting account management. And kind of the structure there has been for these generalists, of course, to align closely with the leaders of these respective units. And we kind of do it all. Like, you own some Salesforce administration as it relates to your group. There's some awesome tools out there that help us make sure we do that properly. We also own all the metrics and stuff and combine that all together. But as we scale into 2021, as our teams continue to scale, kind of that business partner generalist model, like actually doesn't scale probably as gracefully as it is bringing on additional people. So we're thinking about, as we go into next year, looking at looking at some specialist type roles to support kind of these functional operations leaders. So whether that's like a dedicated Salesforce admin that can kind of work across our different generalist ops functions, supporting people in that capacity. But I think at most startups, it's one of those things, like we're hiring a ton of AEs, we're hiring an ops too, but like I would say that ops, sometimes doesn't scale at the same rate as other parts of the business. So a lot of it's getting smart people, getting them into the role, smart ops people, and kind of just like letting them do their thing, get out of their way, saying smart problem solvers can go solve smart problems. And I think, we've been able to scale fairly gracefully over the last 18 months in that structure. But, again, it's something we're always evaluating as we continue to grow across the rest of because right now there's 4 people and we're supporting a lot of sellers and a lot of customer success managers and a lot of SDRs. And, at some point that kind of wide but not deep model starts to deteriorate a bit. I think that was a question you were asking.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think, we look at it, even from the WizOps perspective and Sonar perspective, and we're trying to analyze the just the market and where are we seeing some of these ratios start to hear. And I think originally start to hear, bring on your first operations person around 100 headcount. And I think everybody probably on this call and everybody on this Zoom, the 3 of us, we could all raise our hand and say, that is way too late. We're seeing that shift. You see it down to like about 50 or so now. And you think about where you guys are with Sendoso headcount, roughly around 300. There's 4 of you right now, and you're about to go hire for 2 more. You're starting to even that playing field or get that ratio back on the operations heavy side to support, this fast growth, high growth piece.
And we've actually had a ton of success, like leveraging a third party kind of partner who can flex in some of those, more strategic specialist type resources as we need it. And I think that's been kind of the perfect proving ground as we build out a business case for maybe potentially bringing roles like that in-house. But, we've been very fortunate to work with an awesome partner. Shout out to the Kicksaw team. I know they're huge in WizOps. They've been awesome partners for us as we continue to scale. But, again, as the business needs change, like we're always evaluating kind of how we work, and that's just part of being an ops, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I love that you call out the partner ecosystem, because that's a big piece of it. One of the episodes we're going to have later this year is RevOps as a service. We're seeing this trend now. We're seeing so many people come in and be able to help that, because again, we can all be either generalist or specialist, but there's just certain capacities that we just don't have. We need to, lean on some of our partners to do so. One thing that really jumped out that I've seen another trend in too, and you mentioned it quickly, was operations for the SDR team. That is something that we're seeing more and more of. And I think we've always just had this generalized or generalist of sales ops. Well, who are all they supporting? AEs and SDRs? Do we start to see that sort of parse out, and you have a AE operations and SDR operations? Brendan Short,
Yeah.
a good friend of mine who's running ops over at, or SDR ops over at Zoom, along with Lars and team. Think about that with where they are at Snowflake. So
Yeah.
it's interesting
I
to see
think
that.
the last thought on that, Brad, is like, we look at our SDR function. It's a big team. There tend to be people earlier in their careers. I was an SDR as my first job out of college, best job you could possibly have. And just naturally how they work, they bang on things harder than other groups tend to bang on things. And oftentimes it's their first time using Salesforce. Like, I will fall on my sword, Don Otvos, if you're on the call. When I was an SDR at Yammer, I had to go to Don and he had to help me build Salesforce reports. I was early, it was new. But from an ops perspective, like, if you put a smart operations person to support those teams, the incremental value that it brings almost immediately. Like Annie, who's on my team supporting SDRs, she was hired within a week. She was owning outreach. It was something I didn't have to look after anymore. And the whole SDR team was like, you think that they just hit their biggest goal for the year. So, we look at that function as one that, like, is, if you invest in ops up funnel, everything cascades downward through the funnel in a nice, clean way. And it's been a role that's paid off hugely for us. So if you're thinking about supporting large SDR teams, like, definitely take a pass, or at least strongly consider putting a strong operator embedded with, like, your SDR leadership. It pays dividends.
I love it. You don't know
Honestly,
this.
I think where this,
Go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry.
yeah, I think honestly where the conversation has gone and how it's navigating what it's navigating to is really the crux of the answer, is that, as you're, and I represent all the people out there that are ops teams of one, it's myself and I have, support through our marketing team for some of the more marketing ops related functions. But, I think to Alex's point, people kind of grow into roles that they can solve problems for. So you have an SDR team that, they need someone to figure out how you're deploying the team, how you're creating all the strategy behind it. And you have some generalist problem solver that's going in there and identifying the problem, showing that they have what it takes to solve it. And then that grows into a role in of itself. And that's the case for a lot of small companies is, when you have so much to do, you can't do everything in one category 100%. So you kind of go like, an inch or two deep, and you go across everything, and then you go back and forth and back and forth. And that helps to pick up that generalist breadth. And I just say, normally what I'll see as people move from, or as companies move from more generalized roles to specialized roles, is really when things become, move from being ambiguous to more predictable. So I'll give a shout out to the book Range. If anybody hasn't read Range by David Epstein, it's a great book on this very topic. A lot of good examples in there. I think the best example that I relate to, because I'm a big sports fan, is comparing Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, right? Both have very different backgrounds, but both are at the top of their fields. Golf is a more specialized, predictable type of a sport. You kind of can practice, and yeah, there's still nerves, but it's a very predictable one. Tennis, sport like that, is more ambiguous. You're having to react to what someone else does. So that same can apply to business. More ambiguous problem solving, generalist. Once you get into a bucket of, hey, this is what we know that this role is going to entail, specialist fits into that bucket.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think you were kind of going down that route earlier, even in your intro, talking about all the different hats you wear, right? Like, knowing, you and I've caught up so much about, what your role is and achieve it. But it's interesting, because I think what that starts to segue into, and that's a little bit of our next topic, is how do we prioritize these things? Whether you're a generalist or a specialist, I think the thing that we're all realizing, director of sales and marketing operations, directors of RevOps, we're supporting multiple folks. And we have multiple people all the time coming to us. I talk to Mitchell on our team all the time, who's our RevOps guy, and he's even already getting pinged by me and Christine and Jack and everybody. And because we move so fast, it's hard for us always to prioritize how we're getting these things done. So kind of segueing into that next piece, and Jonathan, I'll let you kind of kick it off. When you think of how do you prioritize that, and how do you make sure that you have this kind of crystal clear message to your organization, being the army of one that you are? How do you kind of cope with that and kind of build on to setting those proper expectations and delivering results?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And anybody who's been in an ops team of one in an early stage company, like burnout is 100% real. And I'd say before you think about anything from a work standpoint and how you prioritize, you have to come to a realization that you're never going to get everything done. So you have to decide, you know what, no matter what, at 5 o'clock, like I'm taking my dog for a walk, or I'm going to play with my kids, or whatever the case may be, just to give yourself that break, because no matter what you do, like there's always going to be 50 more things on the to-do list. Outside of that, I think it comes so much down to defining what are the guardrails for your role, and how does that define the prioritization. I had a meet at my one-on-one with my manager this morning where we were hoping to redefine my role for 2021, because that scope creep happens as you get asked to do more things and as new initiatives pop up. So, taking a look at, how are different roles in different organizations changing? What do we need out of those roles? What do we not need out of what you're currently doing on a daily basis? And then using that and communicating it out to the organization. So it's not only this is what Jonathan owns, but hey, this is what he owns. So he can't be doing all these other things. And I think the combination of that can really help for setting that prioritization afterwards.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think it's the toughest thing to do, because it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Like, we feel on the ops side empowered because we have so many people coming to us, and we feel our importance by hook or crook. We feel the importance every day because of the pressure that it implies on us, right? Marketing's asking for this, sales is asking for this, finance is asking for that. I've talked with folks so many times, like one of the best things that people feel all the time is when their CEO comes directly to them and say, hey, we have a board meeting in a couple of weeks. I know you own the data. Give me some of the insights. Give me some of the pictures that I need to go take to the folks on our board. That's pressure also. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword, but you're
I think
spot
most people
on.
get into these roles because they're the one that always raises their hand. So it's not natural for someone to say, oh, never mind, I'm not going to raise my hand, because that's all you've known for most of your career.
Yeah. And Alex, you talked about this earlier too, was, or kind of as we were prepping for this, I think by default, we're all kind of yes people. Like, we want to help enable. Like, that's why we like to own these systems, own these processes, and make people better at what they do. But there's an art to saying no, and there's an art to saying it gracefully. And, I know you got a lot of thoughts on that. Love to hear them.
Yeah. And Jonathan said it perfectly, which is like, you have to kind of have guardrails for, especially as we're all sitting in our living rooms right now, like, when does work turn off, and when does, like, how you recharge and get your mind state right kind of come back to being the priority. And I believe firmly that, like, the need to keep the edge sharp and protect your focus and bandwidth is even more paramount, say, in the last year as we continue to work into 21. So you got to be able to kind of have boundaries, and the only way you can really have boundaries is by, learning how to to help gracefully. I think that there's a lot of respect that comes from leaders when you come to them and say, hey, here's everything that's a priority right now. Like, maybe we need to shuffle some things around. And I know one thing that's worked very well for me personally is I try as best I can. Of course, when you go into firefighting mode, this often tends to kind of collapse a bit, but just trying to keep a super groomed backlog of just, here's everything that we've kind of got in the queue right now. Make that, like, as honest and transparent as you possibly can, so that when different stakeholders, like, if it's an Asana board, like, make it public, let them know, like, what you're working on right now, and do your best to keep that up to date. Like, I know it's tough. It's like an extra kind of just thing to update, but I have found that the more transparent you are about kind of like what is in ops' queue right now, helps at least people say, like, what, like, you're right, next week's probably fine too. And I think it's oftentimes hard to push back, especially if the asks are coming from above, to say, like, hey, like, does it have to be immediately? Because I got a couple other things we're working on immediately right now. And, is it okay if we get to get it back for you early next week? But I think the last thing that I always have to remind myself on pretty frequently in any type of ops role, of course, is that, perfect is the enemy of done. So, like, there's always that, like, thing that never quite, like, is done. I think, I had the, funny opportunity to go through Scrum training, about 3 years ago. And while it's not, like, the most perfect kind of operational mindset to put on an ops team because of just the nature of, like, the stuff flying out of left field, I think that kind of when you're scoping a project initially, saying, let's just align from the get-go kind of what done looks like on this project. So when we reach that point, ops can shift into the next project that's in that backlog and keep working through it. But it's a battle, and I think the fun part about working in ops, especially go-to-market ops, where you work across leaders like sales leaders that maybe think very differently than maybe like your engineering or product leader. Sometimes it's just you have to roll with the punches, but that's also the fun part about this job, right? Like you're working with go-to-market teams. They're usually the most fun orgs to be a part of, and sometimes you might feel like the outsider where you're the operator and you're not the person taking demos. But I think the good, awesome sales teams know that, like, hey, the ops team behind the scenes is the engine that makes it work. But you got to make sure that ops team doesn't burn out, stays focused, and actually can execute. A lot of that is just having a really tight control over kind of what's entering and what's in the work queue, and how are we actually delivering things back, and of course like taking feedback and iterating from there. But it's something that, like, it's easy to talk about, it's much harder to do, but it's something that I think even at big companies, small companies, like everybody's always trying to focus on prioritization, and if you're not doing that, then you're probably a bit lost. So having something is better than nothing, and it's like just sometimes you just gotta draw a line in the sand and say, hey, like, we're working on it, but it's that might be next week.
Yep. You're spot on. I mean, and truthfully, you hit the nail on the head. Burnout's a real thing. I think it can be across the entire organization. I know we all have our pieces that push on us pretty hard. But I think one of the things that's helped with this, we talked with, y'all both know Pete Kazanji. We've had him on the show before. We're talking about like project management styles and how do we execute, thoroughly. And I brought up that same thing that you just said. I was like, if it's as easy as an Asana board or a Trello board, like, be transparent with your company and what all you're working on. And Pete was like, yeah, go ahead and ask that sales leader to sign in. I'm sure they're going to do it and add something to your board. It's like, no, I'm not going to set the expectation that they're going to add anything, but just that I have a place that I know that I can stand on a firm foundation and let everybody know, here's what I'm working on. So you're spot on. Time flies when you're having fun. We got a couple more minutes left and we got one more topic, but as always, folks that are on the call, jump into the chat, Q&A. Happy to answer questions as we kind of wrap up here. But, we talked about this at the beginning. There's this evolution of generalist and specialist. So to kind of close up here a little bit of the last topic, and Jonathan, I'll let you, lead it off. Do you think you could move from specialist to generalist and then back? How does that pendulum swing? How have you seen it swing sort of in your career? I know you've kind of worn a lot of hats, so.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Personally, I feel like the topic, for generalist and specialist, you have like the personal side of it. Like, am I a worker that is more of a generalist or a specialist? And then you have the role, like, is the role driven more towards general type work and problem solving or specialist type work and problem solving? I think inherently as a person, you're probably leaning towards one or the other. Like, you either love being a generalist or like you love to have a very defined set of skills and roles and responsibilities. Then a role, certainly you have the wide range of, hey, this is just a jack of all trades problem solving. Most RevOps managers or leaders, they're going to be solving all types of problems. Or, you have an admin of a certain tool, or a manager of a certain process or a certain team. That's going to be more specialized. So, defining that is probably where my head's at. But then you can move in and out of certain areas where you may be a little bit more specialized across your generalist breadth.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, what do you think? How's the pendulum swing, and how has it been with you so far in your career?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for this. I know, Jonathan, you kind of threw out the idea in our prep session around like a T-shaped operator, or maybe even like an M-shaped operator, where there are certain parts of your role that's you're very much a generalist and you're just kind of next task up, let's go get it. But there are certain areas where, whether it's a tool that you onboarded that you become kind of the subject matter expert on, where maybe that is better suited for the needs of the business to have like one person who maybe comes from a generalist background, somewhat be the owner of that tool. Like, right now I'm rolling out a CPQ tool and I'm kind of the subject matter expert. I'm the one that's helping AEs put together order forms. And candidly, I wouldn't want that any other way. Like, that's something that the feedback loops you get from kind of getting deep into like a certain problem or solution or tool is really how you can actually serve the business best, by being able to hear firsthand what people are saying and be able to iterate back on that. But I do think that over the course of people's careers, like, it's a pretty natural evolution. Like, maybe you go from generalist to a specialist back to a generalist. And I think in as many times too, like, there are some specialists out there that they came into a company maybe with a specialist mindset, or maybe they came from maybe a bigger org before where they came from a team of specialists and they want to go to like the earlier stage startup and start to like get their hands dirty on, maybe you're not just a Salesforce admin, maybe you're helping like run forecasting or do some analysis. And I think it's natural, especially in the types of businesses that, kind of operate in the Salesforce ecosystem. They tend to be like growing, malleable, like, energetic companies. And I think that's the fun about ops roles is you can kind of try whatever you want because there's always going to be a demand or a need for pretty much anything. So I think it's a natural evolution. For everyone that like wants to be a generalist through and through or wants to be a specialist through and through, there's always going to be jobs for you where that's the case. But I think part of the fun about working in the industry that we do is, it does provide us some flexibility to maybe try something that we haven't had, the experience, the job role or description to have done in our past. I think that's something that keeps people doing this type of jobs, even though it can be pretty damn hard at times.
Amen to that.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing too. And I think obviously looking at these poll results now, we just published those, everybody can see it. We're in a room full of generalists, and that is not not surprising when you think about the tasks that we get handed to us day in and day out, whether it be reporting, whether it be systems, analytics, processes. We have to sort of have that generalist type attitude to go and attack that and attack it well. So I know we're at the top of time. I'm going to fire a couple of random questions out at y'all. We'll wrap up. Again, we'll stay on for another minute or two with everybody if y'all have a couple other questions. But it's always the funnest part of my day because I get to just kind of do nothing except ask y'all kind of random questions. Miller, I'm going to ask you first. What are you watching on Netflix right now? What's top of the queue?
Ooh, is it Night Stalker, the new kind of murder one? We just started watching that. I will say that kind of 2020 for me has been an opportunity to go back and like watch like I'm not gonna call them old, it's not old, but like old series that I know that are just like 12 seasons out there. So we're gonna go back into watching Breaking Bad. We just watched Boardwalk Empire. I'm like, I need like a big like I already know how this works, or I've seen it all, but I want to watch it again. And that's been 2020, now 2021 for me on Netflix.
I love it. Jonathan, what's on TV in the Morgan house?
Yeah, funny enough, we also did Breaking Bad in 2020. Normally Sesame Street is on our TV because that's what keeps our twins, just calm and from screaming. But we're also, my wife and I are in the process of finishing up Yellowstone. So awesome show for those who haven't seen it.
Nice. You mentioned Tiger Woods earlier in your analogy. If you haven't watched the Tiger Woods documentary on HBO Max yet, highly recommend. I haven't watched the second episode of it yet. We also kind of know what goes on. It's just the story of his life.
Yeah.
In the last question, I think we always pose this for everybody on that's obviously in the ops community. When you think about your ops career, and we're going to ask if you could fire up your DeLorean, look back 5 years, 10 years, however long you've been in operations, what advice would you give yourself? Because I think we see this all day in the threads and Slack and in our community. People are always constantly asking for advice. I think that's the coolest part about our community, and it's never going to change. I think the organic just nature of operations, people wanting to help each other out. Nobody goes very long without having some sort of answer to their question. But, Jonathan, I'll start with you, and Alex, you can bring us home. If you were to look back in your career, what sort of advice would you give yourself as you've evolved in your ops career?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you wouldn't have to go back very far for me to not be an ops at all. And that's probably the case for many of the people on the call or asking the question as well. I'd say if anything, probably earlier on in my career, I'd be more curious to what is outside of my bubble, right? You have a tendency to like work within your silo or within your organization in that industry, and like that's your main focus. But I'd say up until the past 2 years, I didn't do the greatest job of networking outside of that, finding new interests or new types of roles and careers. And I mean, WizOps is a perfect example. It's been tremendous to growth in that short period of time that I wish I would have done that a bit earlier more than anything.
Love it. Absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. Alex, what do you think as you reflect back on how you've grown?
Yeah, kind of to piggyback on Jonathan, what I said a little bit is, this is an interesting type of discipline that we work in because there's no playbook for really how this is supposed to work. And the best way that you can actually tap into what is probably the best version of a playbook today is communities like WizOps. Like I think back to, I'm based in San Francisco. I got like a blind LinkedIn email from Pete Kazanji in like 2016 to start going to some meetup that he was hosting with other RevOps people. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's crazy. And I'm going to my first time operator being like, man, I don't even know if I can speak the same language as these people. And like was blown away, honestly, by like sitting next to someone from Uber who's telling me how Uber operates on this kind of stuff and how willing people are to share like their own background troubles. Like, hey, we solved this. Hey, stay away from that tool. Like all that kind of stuff. This community is so open to sharing. So my advice to myself 5 years ago would be get involved with networking with your peers sooner. It pays dividends in just like being a part of a community that like, you know, they're all in this together. We all feel the same pains. We all feel the same frustrations and struggles. Like, you know, don't suffer by yourself. Like, go ask somebody for help. And I think, you know, there's so many other operators out there who are so willing to share. And I think that's been one of the most rewarding parts about doing this type of role for me over my career, is just getting to know other people that do it at other companies. And if you're waiting or you don't know that those are out there, I think that's what I say is like, hey, network, get involved. Like this community opens you with open arms, and that's your playbook. That's how you write the script for how this role is supposed to work. And if you're waiting on that, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah, you're spot on. I tell folks often if there's anything I could do, and I just so strongly encourage just ask a ton of questions. You know, but throw the ego out the door, like nobody cares about it anyway. But just, you know, show humility, ask questions, because there's so many people, close to 1,600 folks now in the community that are willing to jump in and answer those questions and help folks not stub their toes. Sometimes the way that we have done that in the past, but you're spot on. Guys, I can't thank y'all enough for jumping in today. This is such a cool conversation, such a cool topic. Yeah, really can't thank you both enough. So with that being said, obviously we have another episode around the corner. You know, be sure we'll send some emails and a lot of Slack notifications out to everybody, but join us. It's actually going to be in February. Crazy to think that we're 2 weeks away from it. But on February 4th, we're going to have Crystal Deal, the director of RevOps at Capacity, join us. And it should be a pretty solid conversation. We're going to talk about how do you actually go and acquire new technology for your team. We get questions about this all the time in WizOps. So, hey, I'm evaluating this software. How should I go pitch that to my CFO? How do I justify the cost? How do I justify the spend? What's the ROI? So Crystal's a master of this. I can't wait to catch up with her on that. Additionally, be on the lookout. This will be something over the next couple of weeks, and we'll send some emails out about it. We're going to be shooting out a survey. So many folks ask questions about technology. What should I be using at this stage of my company? And oh, by the way, I'm in this industry. Should I be evaluating this versus that? So we want to hear from everybody. We want to hear, you know, sort of what your tech stacks look like, what you're seeing in the market that's very well. So we'll get a whole tech stack survey out. We're actually partnering with some of our friends over at Revenue Collective to cast a very wide net. And so we're going to kind of have cross community input on this, but more to come on that. But again, I know we're over time. Thank you everybody for jumping on and attending. We have a blast with this. Alex, Jonathan, can't thank you both enough. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
This was great.
We'll talk to everybody soon. Of course, we'll get the recording out to everybody that couldn't make it. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Have a great afternoon. See ya.